Hello, this is Tamara Burris with From the Treetop Photography, and today I'm going to be doing a few sneak peek critiques for you. I will be hosting critiques in the month of June and was going to give you a little sample or taste of how that would be. The image that I have here in front of me is by Stephanie of Sweet Life Photography. Stephanie, I enjoyed your website so much. You have absolutely beautiful work with seniors and your colors are amazing. Really, really pretty. And I love this image that you submitted. I think there are so many things that are right about this image, very minor things I would change. The composition is beautiful, the tilt of her head, her expression, it's all wonderful. The retouching that you've done on her is very natural. I don't feel like it's overdone. The eyes aren't overdone. So just a lot of really, really good things about the image. If there was anything that I could suggest, the first thing that I would change would be to just kind of get rid of this little tan line here. I know so many times we warn our little seniors about not tanning, and they do it anyway, so we have to deal with that quite often. So I would just go ahead and make a duplicate layer, and with my patch tool is over here where your healing brushes are, I would just go ahead and outline that little tan line and drag it to an area of the skin that I want it to blend with. Now, prior to deselecting it, I want to fade it out a bit so I don't have any harsh lines around it. And I can bring up my fade command by selecting Command Shift F or Control Shift F on a PC. I'm going to fade it out at about 50% or so, and then I'm going to come up here to this other area where the skin's a bit darker, drag to the darker area of the skin, and repeat the same thing with my fade command. And that's going to give me a natural solution to that harsh tan line. It's a lot more subtle now, and it just doesn't distract as much as it did before. The next thing I would be looking at in this image is the overall tone and color. It's great, it's bright color, it's beautiful, but the red in the background is a little bit distracting to me. It almost is taking up a little more of my eye than she actually is. And part of that is because the background is extremely warm and orange compared to the blue-based lips and red that she's wearing, and also she has a little bit more of a cooler tone to her. So how I would combat this is I would bring up a hue and saturation adjustment layer. I would go to my reds, and I would go ahead and just pull those reds down to match what she's wearing a little bit more. I would even bring the saturation down a bit, and maybe the lightness too, just to darken it a little. Now I know this is doing like crazy things to her skin, and we don't want that. So with the layer mask selected, I'm going to press Command I or Control I to invert it, and now all those changes are hidden. I can take a soft white brush and simply brush them on into the desired areas without having to affect her skin. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to do it real quickly just for time's sake. It won't be perfect, but you can get an idea of how much it's going to change the overall feel of the image. Here it is with it, without it, and here it is with it. And so you can see now the tones are more cohesive in the picture. I still feel like I'd like to warm her up a bit. It looks as though perhaps there was either a reflector being used, or maybe there was a white wall or something casting a little bit of blue on her face. She looks really nice in here, but just in the face area, it looks like there may be a little bit of a color cast. So I'm going to bring up my color balance adjustment. And when I'm correcting skin, I like to only use the midtones and the shadows. Your highlights are mostly colors that are being reflected onto the skin rather than colors that are coming out of the skin. So in the shadows, I'm just going to pull a tiny bit more toward red, a bit more toward the greens, and a tiny bit toward the yellows. I'm going to do the same thing with my midtones. And you can just see, this could be something that you can do according to your own eye and your own taste. Skin is, for the most part, orange. And I know that sounds crazy, but it truly is, and it's different shades of orange. So we just kind of have to watch for that. Okay, I'm going to bring the opacity down a little bit. And of course, I don't want this to affect my background. So what I'm going to do is the same thing. Selecting the layer mask, Command I, Control I to invert. It creates a brush for me. And now I can brush on that warmth only to the areas of the skin that I feel need it, rather than the areas that already looked pretty good. So we don't get too much warmth in certain areas of her body or her face that don't need it. Okay, let's see. Okay, and I can see that little bit of that blue cast is off of her, and I'm going to bring it back up now that I have it inverted. Okay, wonderful. So here's the beginning. And here's our change. And the last thing I would do is I would create a layer with all my adjustments that I can dodge and burn on and do a few effects. And how you do that, and rather than flattening your image, because every time you flatten, you lose some quality when it compresses. So what you want to do is with your top layer selected, you want to hit Command, Alt, Shift, E. And that was again Command Alt Shift E, and that creates a stamp layer. And a stamp layer is basically a layer with all the edits we've done thus far. I'm going to go ahead and grab my burn tool, and I have it set pretty low, 17, 20, right in there, mid-tone selected. And I'm going to create a little bit of a vignette, and I'm going to lower this opacity, so don't get nervous yet. I just want to create a little bit of depth so that she stands out more than the wall, because it is such a great backdrop and bright that sometimes it can be overpowering. So I'm going to go ahead and lower that a bit, and I'm going to create a duplicate of that with Command J. So just another duplicate layer, and I think I can go ahead and lower that a little bit more now that I have a duplicate. And on this layer I'm going to grab my sponge tool, set to saturate with the flow pretty low. And I'm going to add just a little bit of drama here. And this sponge tool is fun to play with. I use it a lot. And it's going to look a little dramatic right now, but we are going to fix that. And I'm just going to add a little bit of drama here and then lower that quite a bit. Okay, so those are just a few minor changes that I made. Here's before and here's the after, but I think that it really brought it all together, and now you notice her rather than noticing that great wall as much. This next image is by Miranda of Miranda Caitlin Photography. Miranda, I have to tell you, I absolutely adored this session. It was so beautiful. It's awesome. I love your style. I love your soft colors. I see that your technique is to have cooler, softer colors. So in this case, unlike the last image that I critiqued, I feel that I would not warm up the tones in this image because the background and overall they are cooler, softer, pastel-like tones I really like. The only thing that I could suggest perhaps is that sometimes when we use those cooler tones, we can actually tend to create some paleness in the children, and so sometimes it might be good just to add a little bit of a blush brush, just a tiny bit, just to give the skin a little bit of a pink tone again. But overall I love the way this looks and I love the whole session. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this is so cute. I love the way that this trail kind of wraps around. It leads your eye in a good way. The girls' expressions are so natural. I love the mom's hand right here on the dad's arm. Everything is awesome. And obviously, I mean, I know what it's like to photograph young children. Sometimes you just get what you get. I'm sure that you wish you could have stepped back 3 or 4 steps so you could have gotten all the feet in the shot. And I know sometimes it just can't be helped, but because that was a little distracting for me, simply because, like, you know, the dad's flip-flops and whatnot. So maybe just a consideration would be to try to offer a crop version of this, because the girls' expressions are so priceless, and I really think that that's really what makes this image special. So maybe offer one cropped and one that's not cropped, because I really think that that really just kind of, now I'm not really noticing any distractions. I'm just noticing what's completely right about the image. So that's really the only critique I have for this image, that and maybe just a tiny bit more of a hint of color to the girls' faces. But overall, your work was just beautiful, and what a great gallery. I'm sure this family was very, very happy. This next image is by Memories by Mare, or Mary. I apologize in advance if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but you are a lady after my own heart. I love artistic imagery, and this image caught my eye right away. I love the way the leaves are dancing around her head. I love the romance in it, the long hair, the flowing gown. I love the fact that you have her centered in this little brook. there's so many pretty lines in this image. Of course, I'm sure that if we could have everything perfect, we wouldn't have had the gown cut off, but you know, not everything can be helped, but ideally it would have been great to have the tail of the gown flowing. But overall, it's just really, really nice image. I'm going to go ahead and show you something that I would do, something I do to most of my images. I'm going to create a duplicate layer. Oh, sorry, wrong setting. I'm going to create a duplicate layer, and I'm going to go to my menu to Image, Adjustments, Shadows, and Highlights. Okay, so some of you, when you open this, it may look like this. You need to click on the Show More Options area to get the rest of the menu. Okay, so what this does is this just allows us to find the detail that's hidden in the shadows. Sometimes when we have a real high contrast image like this, we miss out on some of those details. So I'm just going in here and adjusting, and you can play with this, and there's all kinds of ways to do it. It can be pretty dramatic or it can be subtle, however it suits your taste. The highlights, I don't have to use those that often, but sometimes I will if my whites are very bright, such in this case. It's a pretty high contrast image. Let's see, and then down here where it says color correction, I generally leave that at 0. I generally don't want it messing with my color too much. So okay, so there's the after and there's the before. Okay, and so we can come over here and we can just lower the opacity to suit our taste. Okay, so that would be the first change I would make. The next change I would make, just in my opinion, when the grass gets kind of neon like this, personally I feel like it can kind of become the subject of the image because it is rather bright compared to, you know, her white gown, and she's a little more muted here. So I have a whole set of actions called ethereal because that's how much I love artistic images, and so I have an action that is specifically for grass like this, and I'm going to go ahead and play that now to desaturate it. It's called Winter Blackberry, and it just basically desaturates the grass. It's going to be real extreme at first. You could create some really cool effects if you wanted to go extremely conceptual or fine art. You could go with that, and I kind of like that actually, but I'm going to go ahead and lower it and just bring it down to a more muted grass color. There we go. Okay, and we could do, I'm going to go ahead and play one other action on this. Let me do this one called Happily, and I'm going to bring that down a bit and just it just softens it up just a bit. And so mainly my main critique of this image would be just getting, you know, just achieving tonal harmony. When we began, I feel like it was, you know, there were a lot of really dark darks and really bright brights, and sometimes that's our goal, but when you can bring out those midtones, you can bring out more color and more of the subtle nuances that were in the image to begin with. All right, ladies, so I hope that you guys have enjoyed these little sneak peek critiques, and I hope to see some of you in June. Till then.